Welcome back, Global War in 1939. This is going to be the recap video for this particular game. So we're going to call it here as an Axis win. Once the final blow, so we did three major operations. Each Axis country played a role in three key big battles, and then the final straw was the loss of London, losing their entire economy for one full round. All that money is now in the hands of the Axis. So Germany itself next turn has 187 to spend. So any losses in gaining London, we're going to be able to easily get those units back on the map and continuously push forward. Now after a pretty lengthy conversation with my opponent, we actually played it out as if we would continue to continue. So in the Atlantic, even though his navy is still quite sizable, but a good chunk of his navy are transports or low-level vessels, and then you add that with the German navy. So the Allies are in a position where they can counter and retake London. I've no doubt that they can do that with these American troops here, which would force their navy to stay in the sea zone to protect all their transports. At that point, they'll have about 18 transports here. Obviously, they're not going to leave them defenseless. We would come in with our navy and our entire air force, and the German navy would be significantly weakened, with no doubt. But the odds are in the German favor. The Americans or the Commonwealth Americans would have no fleet left outside of scattered one or two. So them getting reinforcements back to London would be quite difficult. And we are set up for a counterattack to counterattack theirs. So even if they come in on the next American turn, capture London, I have no doubt that they can do that. Both factories would be completely destroyed. Then we would come in and counter that. Again, taking their capital and them losing their income again for another turn. Losing your ability to get new units on the map for one turn is devastating. But 2 turns, that's a death blow. So that's and then for them to continuously push in Europe and get to Berlin is coming to a realization that that's probably not going to happen. Down in Africa, the Allies did a fantastic job, especially after the fall of Cairo. Normally, what ends up happening with most games, from my experience, is that once Cairo falls for the Allies, the rest of Africa quickly follows, especially Northern Africa. But the Allies have done a fantastic job, and I'm really taken back how quickly they were able to get additional resources to Africa, especially with the fall of their medium factory. But them building these 3 military bases, bringing in resources from Canada, from the U.S., from Britain, really kept the Italians from really spreading out and inserting their dominance. It made playing Italy this game very difficult. So he did a fantastic job there. And Cairo, there's very little that we can do to protect Cairo. It will fall. So we would have to let it fall because there's nothing that we can do to stop it. And then figure out a way to counter that at some point in the future. So, and it wouldn't be right away. We'd be eyeing it possibly a turn 14 going back into Cairo with the same time and trying to fight off all these forces here. Now, their army loss in Cyrenaica was definitely a big blow to the Allies, a big win for us. But we lost the vast majority of our army as well. So it's not only that they have to rebuild, but we do too. So we're back in that production race of who can build quicker. And that's why we decided that no matter what, for the rest of the game, Italy's going to be building 2 transports. The Germans are going to ensure that they have 4 units to transfer down in Kriegsmarine. And then, obviously, Italy's going to dump everything into artillery and infantry. They're going to forget about building navy because I don't think they have to anymore. And the Mediterranean's pretty much secure, especially if or when Gibraltar falls, which would happen next turn anyways, the Mediterranean would be completely 100% secure. So we would take the Italian Navy, head out into the Atlantic to help out the German Navy. And then the Italians would start eyeing all these convoy boxes, lowering the economy of the Allies. Now, not saying this is all easy task to do and guarantee. Obviously, the Allies would try to prevent us, but this would be our plan moving forward to really get the British economy down in the $20 range, $30 range, something like that. Get them out of the 40s, and then that would put us in the Axis in Europe in a position where we're putting more units on the map than they are. And then just outproduce them, especially if they would have lost this Navy here, which would have been our next target. Because now they could have moved out to save all the destroyers, whatever battleships that they had. The American had one aircraft carrier. The Americans and the Russians had one battleship each, and the British had a ton of destroyers. But even if they moved that out to save all those vessels, they would put all the transports at risk, and then having to rebuild from scratch would be a pretty big blow economically. And then most or a good chunk of our money don't need to go so much into the army like we had the last 5 turns. We would start putting a lot of our resources and new units into Navy. A lot of subs, a couple of battleships here and there, but mostly subs. And with the German bonus to subs, they get very devastating. So that would force the Allies to counter that and buy destroyers, which are more expensive than our subs. And then, but if they're buying destroyers, then they're not buying transports. That would be the idea. So we would swarm them for the next 3 turns. We would purchase 10 subs out of Berlin, and then out of Stettin, not Berlin, out of Western Germany, we would put 10 subs a turn for at least the next 3 at minimum, and then infantry to really secure this part of the Europe. Our Russian holdings are pretty secure. We do have a sizable army. It will take Russia a couple turns to even match our strength. As right now, they may seem strong, but they're strong in infantry, weak in offensive punch, as the vast majority, like all their tanks, are down here. And we would not allow this to escape back up into Russia. We would slowly hunt this down and remove this from the map. But I have no doubt that this will do a significant amount of damage. They're kind of at the point where they have to do a suicide run, but every time they engage in battle, it'll just get weaker. They'll lose their ability to reinforce it, where we will continue to reinforce. Another idea, there, as you can see, there's a build up here. We would declare war on Turkey, and then bring another. So all new units being laid here, instead of having to go all the way around, we would just drive through Turkey and eventually consume the rest of the Middle East. That would be the idea there. Obviously, the Allies would again try to stop us, but that would be the that would be the by the time we get to round 15, the most of the, if not all, the Middle East should be under our control if our plans go well. Now, over to Asia, this is where the vast majority of our difficulties are coming from. The Japanese economy last turn shrunk by $15. That is a lot. A lot. A lot of that had to do with the Allies coming up with 2 transports, and they're starting to island hop, because our plan was to defend it with our Navy, but then our Navy got distracted with their Navy, trying to ward them off. There was a big, significant battle here. The Commonwealth pretty much lost most of their ships. They do have a smaller Navy, but it's only they have 2 cruisers and a couple of destroyers. But they only have 2 transports left. Obviously, we would target that. We would build another naval base here, repair all of our battleships, and get them back in the fight, and then continuously pour money into our Navy to counter the Americans. So it'd be pretty much one for one dollar wise to a degree, even though America does make more money. But with the German threats, especially in the Atlantic, if they wanted to get back into London, they would have to pour a lot of resources into the Atlantic, which takes away from the Pacific, allowing Japan to rebuild any losses that they had in our naval conflict down here. Which overall, we only lost 8 ships, so it wouldn't take much to get those ships back. But we still also got to worry about the army. Russia has now come in and joined the fight in Asia. FEC is still very strong. So the fight for China is certainly not over by any means, and a lot of work would need to be done. But I think we're prevailing in the naval front, which then we can slow down on purchasing any new ships and match our focus on the army and getting new units into China. But it'd be, I don't think China would ever fall in this particular game. I just think it'll just be until the end of round 15. It'll just be that constant. I take over territory, he captures it back, and we just go back and forth over the same 2 or 3 territories over and over again. The idea with FEC is to prevent them from getting into China. If they ever did, then that'd be it for us. We'd have to vacate all mainland and just focus on the islands. But the idea is to purposely stalemate FEC. Yeah, that pins down a big Japanese army, but also pins them down as well. They won't be able to move out, nor would we, and they would have to build a secondary army to go after China, Russia. That's would be the idea or the plan. Now, if that would work, I have no idea. China's still very strong. They still got 14 infantry. They still got a ton of artillery and their fighter. So even though they lost all their tanks and cavalry a couple turns ago, but so did we. And I think that was our mistake in China. I think the reason why they're doing so well, but we got a little over zealous and sent up all of our tanks to fight his, and in the end we end up losing that battle. It was my attack and then his counterattack, and then we ended up losing. I think that was our mistake. We should have kept all of our tanks with our infantry, and I think this region of the map would look completely different if we never done that. So that was definitely our fault, and we should not have done it. But here we are. But yeah, if we had to so how this would have played out, my fear at the time was that all this tanks and cavalry would come and capture all this area. What we should have done is probably let them, and then put our tank infantry army in this area and kind of pin them down, and just have to recapture all this territory over time. And then what would end up happening, he can't produce up here. So his army would get significantly weaker as time went on. Ours would only get stronger, and I think we should have just chased him until there was a fight in Korea, if that's how it would have played out. But unfortunately, we made a mistake, and it cost us pretty bad. Now we're in pretty dire situation here. Not saying that our fight is over, by no means. But it's becoming very difficult, especially now with both communist countries, China, working against us, having to keep this army in place. Because if this ever got in China, that'd be it for us. And for the Australians, they did a really good job building up their Army Corps. They have a good number of infantry, artillery, but with the loss of their Navy now, it'll be very difficult for them to get back. Our plan with our transports and our units on these islands is to go recapture the losses in our money islands, as that takes priority. That's where we're getting a good chunk of our money, and then slowly come back into these, recapture this area, and then lower the Anzac's income down to like $8, and then at that point, even though we're not technically eliminating from the game, but they'll be so weakened that their contributions won't be as impactful as it is right now. Right now, they're fairly rich for the size of their nation, for their starting income. So my opponent did a really good job with Anzac, did a really good job with FEC, and really keeping Japan at bay and shifting our focus on things that we didn't really want to do, and that's key. You always want to put your opponent in a position where they're making the moves you want them to make, instead of what they want to actually plan out. And if you can interrupt, say they got a 3-turn major operation and they need forces to build up and move in to get into position before they strike. So if it takes them 3 turns to, work out whatever plan that they're doing, and you figure out or try to guess what they're doing and then interrupt their plans, it's always good for you, bad for your opponents. And the perfect example was Denmark. Really delayed us. We really wanted to go into London the turn prior, but the Allies did a pretty decent job in delaying that. They just ran out of delay factors, so it was pretty nervous there for a second. But yeah, so that was our overall. If moving forward, this is what we would have started to plan out. Get into the Atlantic, Turkey, and then get as many forces to Africa to help out Italy as possible. And then that's how Germany, Italy would have won, if we would have continued on. There would be no reason, there was no plans to go into North America, South America. They were eyeing holding on to Europe, India, or Turkey, the Middle East, and getting as much basically sending the vast majority of any new units into Africa, building up the Navy significantly, building up the Navy from here to force the Americans and the British to pour money into their Navy. And ships are great, but it's the most expensive type of warfare, and Navy can't secure further resources. So the idea would be to slowly continuously shrink the Allied economy. There'd be very little that we could do to shrink the American economy, but the British, the plan was to get them down to like $30 a turn, and then that would effectively get them out of the game. They wouldn't be able to compete economically, right? And then the plan with Japan, there was no real major operations moving forward. It was just resecuring lost territory, keeping FEC at bay, stalemating China, and fighting back the Soviets up north. In the Navy, try to match the Americans 1-for-1 as best we can. Right now in the Navy, we are further ahead. In support vessel wise, both countries are about the same. Capital ship wise, we're double than what they have, and we have better battleships than them with the Yamato. Now in round 10, they would have got Iowa classes, so all their battleships would have been upgraded, but they don't get the extra hit like we do. But their attack and defense would increase by 1 up to 9 with Iowa after round 10. So that would have been a help for sure, but we still are double. We have one more aircraft carrier than them, and battleship wise, they have 3, and 1 they just bought. We got 5, 6, 7, 8 with plans to build at least 1 battleship a turn for the rest of the game. So that's where, and then focus on rebuilding the support vessels, so more destroyers, couple cruisers, but putting a lot of money into destroyers. So when the next big naval engagement happens, we double their capital ships, but then any hits would just be absorbed by our cheaper destroyers, and then let the battleships and aircraft carriers do the damage for us. So that was the plan. No real big operations, just not collapsing. That was the idea. Just don't collapse and keep our economy around the $85, $95 mark, and then let the Germans win the game. All right, so that is it for the review. This is it for this game. We do have a couple more in the works. A couple rematches with opponents that we've already played. So we're looking forward to that. And I'm going to try to convince someone to play the role of the Axis so I can have a turn with the Allies. Yeah, so I think it'll be fun. All right, well, thank you for watching. Have yourself a great day.